What is this? You? No.
No, I think it should be on by now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let no, yeah.
Push, push, no?
Then you push, right. If it says so. Okay, we would like to resume our second part of our discussion today. Before I go ahead and present speakers that we have for the second panel, I would like to offer a little summary of what we've just discussed in the first part of our conversation. What I think is an interesting takeaway that listening to two well-established practitioners in the field of art investment and an academic who has been following the art industry for many, many years, we see that, frankly, there has been so far very limited success in creating institutional demand for art anywhere in the world. And unfortunately, up to date, art market remains a domain where high net worth individuals, the advisors, dealers, auction houses operate in the world of imperfect information, and where institutional investors, whether this is for an issue of lack of information or lack of size, they're still not yet comfortable to put significant capital into the art market. Whether this is about to change, we would learn today from talking with distinguished speakers, which I'm very proud to present to you. And I'll put them questions forward about the future of art market and art investment. And let me present them to you right away. Next to me is Emilia Kabakov, and also today in the audience is Ilya Kabakov. Ilya and Emilia Kabakov are the legendary Russian artists who now reside in the U.S., and they're definitely part of our national treasure, I would say, and we are very pleased to have them here. Next to Emilia, I have ArtAssure Edelman, who is the legend, and I don't think I need to really go into the very detailed background presentation of ArtAssure, but I think what is extremely important is that ArtAssure combines knowledge and reputation as a finance professional and as art professional, and having this background really I think was a basis for ArtAssure to move forward with some interesting initiatives in art finance world, and we would like to learn about those today. And finally, next to ArtAssure is Valeria Pankova, who works for the Russian asset management group called Atlanta, and she deserved to be here today. And the reason she deserved that, because she managed to register the first Russian art fund. There was a race between 5 Russian asset management groups trying to benefit from a new legislation that allowed for onshore art fund creation, and she managed to get it first. And she's going to talk to us about this new Russian art fund that she put in place and what future holds for Russian art securitization ideas going forward. So this is our speakers, and I would like to start by posing a question to Valeria maybe first, to tell us a little bit more about the experience you had with your fund, and tell us what you actually have done, because this is really an example of what new forms of art investment are being created on the market today. And just to let everyone get the how do you call them, the translation, it's on the channel 1 basically.
I'm sorry, I can speak English, but it's more convenient for me to speak in Russia. Здравствуйте. Мы создали в России первый фонд. Наш фонд был зарегистрирован буквально на прошлой неделе.
Our first fund in Russia, it was registered just 1 week ago, and I would like to share with you our experience, how we created that. Thanks to the Russian legislation in summer, it became possible to create a closed-end art fund. And what is it in Russia? This is the fund where the different shareholders can be present. They could be residents of Russia, not residents. They could be qualified investors and also just the individuals who would like to participate in the investing in arts. And what the fund does, fund issues their shares, and the shareholders could invest their money as well as the assets, art assets, objects of art. And then, as soon as we have the pool of the shareholders, we start the process of investing. For example, we have an individual who brought the collection 33 drawings of Karl Brülow, famous Russian painter devoted to the Countess Wittgenstein. What are we planning to do with this collection? In spring of 2011, we are planning to have an exhibition in St. Petersburg in Russian Museum. This is one of the greatest museums in the world, which boasts of the huge collection of Brülow. And we're going to have this exhibition, and we will have our drawings presented at this exhibition from our collection. Now let's turn to this question: what is our fund about? The fund is this property body which is managed by the management company, and our fund serves several organizations. It always has an appraiser company which will be appraising the art assets. Always our fund will be audited once a year. We will also have the specialized depository. It's a special company which will protect the interests of the shareholders and will decide which of the transactions can be approved.
If we go back to English, this is a case study and probably the first example of onshore securitization according to Russian law. So right now, like Philip Hoffman funds, for example, it would not be available for marketing and sale in the US or in the UK or in any other major jurisdiction. Russia is, of course, not a major jurisdiction, but it's still an investment-grade country with 140 million people living in it, and with a fairly strong domestic demand for collective investment vehicles. So Russia really pioneered this legislation that allowed creation of the funds like Valeria's to market it to qualified investors in the country. And this probably relatively small securitization definitely sets the precedent. And based on our estimates, there is approximately $350 million worth of art investment that's going to be implemented in Russia within the next 3 to 4 months by 5 different asset management groups that are going to follow exactly this route. This is, of course, a new, maybe scale way of developing collective investment vehicles in art. And I would like, on that note, ask Asher to tell us what future holds for various art investment schemes going forward, and whether do you think there is going to be opportunity to broaden the investor base for art as alternative investment class?
Schemes?
You got me.
I'm very happy to be here, Sergey. You know that I think that your work is among the very best. And then I'll go back to the beginning. I would guess that within 10 years, you're all going to wake up one day and you're going to see something very different than you see now. You're going to see a transparent, liquid art market. And you're going to see trading every day. And that trading every day will take place probably at auction houses. The nature of the auction houses will be more like stock exchanges today. The nature of Philip, myself, and others who, to some degree, buy and sell art will be quite different. We'll be buying and selling art like Goldman buys and sells for its own account, and we'll be advising others who will go to those auction houses every day, like you go to the stock exchange every day, on perhaps what they should be buying and selling. You will also wake up to see a moment, and I hope to be here to join you, when you will be able to invest in art without owning any. And you will be able to hedge your 1921 Picasso on a surrogate. And the surrogate might even be Andy Warhol's shoes, because it will be mathematically how one performs against the other, as opposed to specifically 1921 Picassos. Not enough of them trade to really know, but certainly enough surrogates trade to really know. You will be able to decide, no, I want to keep my art, but I'm afraid of the market, so I want to protect myself. So you will be able to buy a derivative to protect yourself. And this will come. And this will come sooner than you think, stepping back. Unlike my, so far, friends and business colleagues here, I come to the art market as a collector. I have always had art on my wall. Since I was a very young person, 16 years old, I began to collect. And I have always spent all of my money on art, and it continues. And it is my pleasure. I come to this world because of my pleasure. Some of you know I was in investment banking and also economics and a teacher before. But I come to this world because of my pleasure. Because of my past, as sordid as it may seem to some of you, I also come to this world with some ability to understand hedging and to understand liquefaction of things that are illiquid. Here's what we do, and I'll be brief. We provide liquidity in many different forms to people who own art. We provide guarantees of collections that go to auction, so that if you have a collection worth X millions of dollars, we will guarantee that that collection will sell at X millions of dollars at auction. We provide loans of relatively unlimited amounts and guarantees as well to collections that are going to be sold in the following year. And we provide liquidity through purchase of art collections, where we may at times arrange for a profit share on the way out, which will effectively provide for us to earn interest on the way in. We arrange auction, and you can remain totally anonymous, for all kinds of collections. We take up your cause in terms of the negotiations with the auction houses, the placement of your work, how it sits in the catalog, how it sits in the house. We track it through all the way through the auction process. And in the process, we are modeling and developing derivatives which will allow all of these things that I discussed earlier to take place, I would say, in the next 10 years. We may not be the first, but we are the first to try. We may not be the biggest and first to get there. Thanks you.
Thank you, Asher. Before I let Emilia comment on this discussion, let me tell you that I think Ilya and Emilia Kabakov, they are one of this perfect litmus tests of the changing, ever-changing demand on the art market. I think you've been working with collectors and art investors around the world, and I've been seeing you traveling unstoppable all over the world, and since recently going to some new destinations like places in the Gulf and some other faraway places to talk to potential and existing collectors and followers of your art. What would you say about this changing landscape of who is buying art today? What do you like about it and what you don't?
Well, first of all, I think I'm in the wrong place because to invite an artist to sit in a panel with investors, art foundations, funds.
Значит, чтобы получать прибыль, да, это очень важно получить прибыль. Да, я думаю.
To invite a cow to advise a farmer how to sell and market the milk. So it's a little bit out of reality here. But Ilya and I are working together for more than 20 years. I'm in the art field more than 30 years. And art market constantly change. And it's not true that artists don't watch market. Artists very carefully watch each other. And that's connected to the art market, because we always ask, are you on this exhibition or that exhibition? How much you selling for now? And we try to adjust. And it's maybe 10 top artists. And I'm not talking about commercial artists. I'm talking about kind of serious quality, very smart and very good artists. But we coordinate in a way, which you as a collector and even dealer don't know. We do know that. At some point, I was thinking that art galleries and auctions are going to merge, because that was where market was going to, and they did for a while. I think it's failed. Then I was thinking there will be a big emergent kind of foundations, and this foundation will take over. It's come out of the different funds, investing funds, artist funds, and it's nothing new about it, because in a way artists start investing in themselves by doing artist foundations. And it become more and more often that you can see every artist doing his own foundation. So we are acting as investors, because we are actually doing the same thing. We consolidate what we have, and then we trying to protect the future of the artist legacy this way, because we don't want it to be completely sold out. It's not that we don't want art to be sold, but we want to be at least a little bit in charge ourselves, what's going to happen to the artist's legacy after artists die. And at one point, when Ilya's getting older and I'm getting older, a lot of people come and say, what's going to happen when you die? And it happens when we have dinner. And somebody come to you and said, and what's going to happen when you die? And I got so mad at some point, I said, you know what? I'm going to sell everything before we die. Then I changed my mind, and we're doing foundation. You can't sell really everything. Here we were talking about investing in a high level and low level. You said that you can profit from a very high cost art. Everything is relative. Whatever we look today as a very high investment and very high price, maybe tomorrow is not going to cost anything, or maybe it's going to cost so much more that we were thinking, oops, I made a mistake. I have a collector, 25 years ago, I offered him Kabakov, and I said $50,000, and he said, you are crazy. It's so much money. Then he came back to me and he said, $500,000 I pay for Kabakov. I was so stupid. I have a strategy in a way without being a dealer and without being a collector. I am a collector a little bit, but not on your level and everybody else here. And I think art is an investment, and art is better investment than everything else. Not in a term of return, maybe financially sometimes, but because it's aesthetical return. You live, as somebody said here, you live with it, you enjoy it, you get pleasure. It's make your life richer and better. And that's probably much more important than how much money you get by the end. In Switzerland, there is a rule. People collect not for themselves. They usually collect for the next generation. And then next generation either keep collecting or they sell what their parents collect for them, and they collect next art, next period. And then they collect again, not for themselves, but for their grandchildren or children. It's very interesting. This way they kind of cover old fields. They accumulate wealth. They wait a long time as an investment. It's a long-term investment, but at the same time, they derive a very good, big pleasure from what they have on the walls and in the family. And they teach their children how to be collectors from very young age and how to live with beauty of collecting and the beauty of art and culture. Yeah, I'm finishing.
Sorry.
I was going to say that in this case, you can see that I'm working on, I kind of have many faces. I work as an artist, I work as a little bit as a dealer, although we have a lot of dealers. And at some point, one of the big dealers said, I would work with Kabakov, but I'm afraid of Emilia. And that's...
That's good.
Well, I think if we go, thank you very much for these responses. We wanted to talk a little bit about future of art as investment here at this panel. And what I find really interesting in these presentations which you've just heard, we had the practical case of a new form of investing in art presented to us by Valeria. We had unexpectedly bright future, I would say, painted to us by Assure, which frankly I share. I do buy into this vision, and I do believe, I don't know whether it's 10 years or 5 or 20, but I think there is definitely a move towards a more transparent and I would say democratic way.
At my age, it has to be 10.
I'm fine with 10. So I think it's definitely getting in the right direction. And I also, what I really hear in what Emilia says, that there are some practical hints on how it actually can work. One of these hints is the whole notion of foundation being established, being created by important, significant artists during their lifetime. One of the very good examples, which obviously most of you, of course, know, is Andy Warhol's foundation and how it functions. No wonder, according to our statistics, Andy Warhol already is the number three most valuable artist, with a market cap measured based on top 5,000, which is the total value of artworks by Warhol in top 5,000, of $1.25 billion, with 16 repeat sales in the third quarter of this year alone. And this would be something that a capital markets guy would tell you looks like a mid-cap stock, right? $1.2 billion, 16 block trades during a month. It almost sounds like there is a really real liquid, transparent, and fairly normal market for that kind of art. There are various reasons why is that, but one thing which is extremely important for transacting with art is ability to mitigate risks which stem from issues which are totally alien to traditional financial investors, like authentication, like title. And obviously, when you have an efficiently functioning foundation, that creates a very important part of art market infrastructure. And with the arrival of IT technologies, you can actually you can establish foundation and manage it efficiently and really support creation of transparent market with relatively low cost, as long as there is concerted effort to put it all in place. And I think that would be one of the few measures that would hopefully work towards improving the infrastructure of the art market. And I would like to ask Valeria to share her experience with setting up the first fund. How difficult it was for you to go and solve on the issues of authenticity, good title, and really understanding that what you have as an asset is really an asset. Was it a difficult process to do this deal with Brylov collection?
Немножечко об опыте. Когда мы приобретали коллекцию Брюлова, хочу сказать, что это они
paintings, some they were sepia, some they were just like graphite design. And when we had an expertise of these different paintings, it was a very unique masterpiece. And during 3 months, they had this expertise, and it was a discovery. The discovery, it's really the technique of sepia was something very unique. And it's really it's a material very unique for our next exhibition for our museum. So it was a project, a long-term project with the Russian museum, and with their expertise, it was a great honor for our collection that everything is authentic. But because of our legislation, we have to show our shareholders that really our collection is authentic. We need to have some insurance for our collection, so we need to call an insurance company. The insurance company has also to insure her own risks. So it was a big problem for us to really have an estimate. The estimate has to be, we have to do it according to the requirement of the insurance company. And our legislation in Russia, according to the art, is something very new. It was just created a very short time ago, and then the companies that could really perform the right estimate and expertise, it was very difficult. It was something new, and so we found a company and they could help us and solve this problem tied to the estimate of the value of art. And so about the performance of the fund, the legislation in Russia, they really protect the interest of the shareholders. So for to the defense of the shareholders, we have a specialized depository that are supposed to protect the assets, and you cannot sell the assets without the proper legislation. So it's very hard, for example, to take out of the country something for exhibition or to sell something out of the country. We need to have really a confirmed agreement for the sale. So when we have all these aspects, it took quite a long time. And it took more than 1 month, and we have to spend a lot of money only to find a facility for the art conservation that will match the requirements of the bank and the specialized depository.
Thank you, Valeria. Sorry. That is, I think, an interesting example. What Valeria didn't mention, but I can tell you, and I hope she would mind, is this management company. They also manage funds like equity, bonds, and etc. And that was like arrival for them to a totally new world when they discovered all these issues they have to deal with in order to create the art fund. It all started as an interesting journey. Create a new product. And it all turned out to be a logistical nightmare to deal with all these issues, which Valeria just described. Of course, by now there is an experience of how to do securitization and create new art funds going forward. But obviously, all these risks, which we all know about, which are related to art as an asset class, related to authenticity, related to good title, and some other risks that we all know of, they are definitely creating a little obstacle for this bright future that we have for art as an investable market going forward. At that note, I would like really to go back to ArtAssure and say, listen, this bright future was spectacular. I really like it, and I really want to be the part of it. Would you help us how to get there?
Well, to start with, let's go back to the past again for a second. I can think of no period in history, and I've looked, that art has not remained an item of value with which you could trade for something at all times, including during wars, inflation, deflation, depression, and recession. And I can think of very few periods, and I know this is going to be hard for you to all to accept, but certainly you can accept some of the accepted average indexes now. And if you do accept those, there are better ways to do it, but if you do accept those, there are very few periods in recent history, and I use recent history as the last 15, 20 years, that art has not outperformed the Standard & Poor's, the Dow Jones, and the NASDAQ. And I use indexes which are general, and I use indexes which are very specific in that view. Going back in time for a moment, I can tell you that in 1979, I started collecting in 1957, but 1979, I was advised to insure my collection. Never thought about that before. I was too busy in business. And I had an appraisal done to insure my collection. It's easier in America. And it turned out that it was worth more than my business, and I had quite a good business. So I can tell you that my personal experience as a collector who collected art that he loved and that he looked at carefully and that he went to look at 2 days a week of every week of his life until then, as a collector of things that sold for very little money that I put away because I loved them, it worked. I began then to look at the art market, not really 79, but in the 80s I began to look at the art market as a market, and came to certain conclusions, which have changed since, because value has changed since, but that there's a certain time in a young artist's progression that you can buy inexpensive art and make money at it. There are some rules, But you can indeed do that, and you make much more money percentage-wise than you do in buying multi-million-dollar pictures. As a dealer, I deal in multi-million-dollar pictures as often as possible because the dollars are bigger.
But nevertheless, if we again talk about the vision for the future of art as investment class, and we talk about normalization and greater transparency of art market, and this new art market where a lot of market participants are comfortable to participating without necessarily having deep and intimate knowledge of all this inside information that surrounds art market transaction. What do you think has to change, Asher, in art market infrastructure for us to get there?
Well, I think that you need both transparency and liquidity, and I think there are a lot of ways to come to it. We're doing part of it because we've seen a way to bring some liquidity to the market. Liquidity always brings transparency because more things trade in the liquid market, which people can see. And so I think that is a major factor. I think there are other factors as well. I don't think they include a bunch of bureaucratic rules, but that's just my point of view.
That's perfect. Yeah, Emilia, if I may ask you, when we all wake up in this perfect world where art trades and maybe you pick a newspaper and it tells you the Kabakov art today is 2.5%, and
index.
Yeah, exactly. Kabakov index is 2.5% up, and I don't know, Richter index is down 3%, and etc. Isn't it surreal for you?
It's a form of art, surrealism.
It's a very provocative question, right? I don't know. It's probably surreal at this point. I do think art is a market, and it always was, because when you read history, people were trading art, people were selling art, artists were selling. It always was up for sale. So nothing strange about it, even for the artist. As an investment, I think it's better than everything else. What you're doing right now, you're trying to open the field to everybody. You definitely try to make it transparent. I think it's wonderful. It's very good for the artists because sometimes we do sell work, we don't know what's going on, we don't understand how the market works, we don't understand what dealers are doing. In this case, if it's visible, it's very comfortable for everybody. It's comfortable for the collector, it's comfortable for investor, and it's definitely very good for the artist.
Well, I think I would even go deeper with my question, if I may. There is a fascinating thing about artist legacy being valued with dollar signs. I think from a philosophical point of view, it's incredible that intellectual property, the creative talent, gets assigned a market value. And these days, it gets assigned right away in a lifetime of an important artist. And even putting aside all the psychological implications that can put and create for the artist who basically gets market value for his talent every day at this art market transactions. Even now, not 10 years from now when you're going to get Kabakov index published in the newspaper, even today you really know what your talent is translating into. I think the interesting question is, how do you feel comparatively to, for example, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, who has his own talent, and he has his own creative energy, which has been translated into the market value of his company, and also some other creative talents, like in pharma sector, where you have research and development talents and scientists working to create new drugs, which are then get valued in dollar signs and market capitalizations of the pharma companies. Do you think that eventually you as artists going to be, forgive me for saying that, abused and used in order to create market capitalization of art-related companies? Or you think you better stay out of this game?
I think we better stay out of this game. I think it will be a tragedy if artist himself will participate actively in the market and thinking about his art from the point of market value of the art, because creativity is a very subtle thing. You try to abuse it, you make production out of it, I'm afraid it's going to be lost. And the beauty of creativity and beauty of talent is that it's completely unique. You may produce, but you can't create, and that's a big difference.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's wonderful. Maybe I would very much like to open to open an opportunity to ask questions to distinguished panelists. We have a joy of having with us today. But before I do that, I really would like to run a very little summary. I think we do believe there is a bright future ahead of us in terms of art market development and greater transparency of the art market, and art becoming increasingly more suitable as investment class to maybe some new investors that would be able to access art and invest in art, maybe even through structures like Valeria is putting together, or also through all kind of forms and interesting ideas that ArtAssure has developed for letting financial investors to participate in art market through guarantees and some other forms that you feel free to comment about if you like. But definitely there is a broadening universe of investors available for art market of tomorrow, and there is definitely a future for that. And I think the key rule, which has been just brilliantly formulated by Emilia, is that in all this wonderful process, we should not be abusing the creativity and the talent of the artists that work on this fantastic art creation as they do. And at that stage, I would like really to encourage questions to our distinguished speakers here. Thank you.
A question to Valeria. Did I understand right that foreign investors were also invited to invest in your fund? And is your fund also going to spend money, or is it just acquiring collections as an investment vehicle? I mean, if you're associated with Leader Group, when are they going to start spending the hundreds of millions of the pension fund into art?
That's a challenge.
Извините, я ждала.
Apologize, I was waiting for the interpretation to be finished. Yes, our fund is open not only for the Russian investors, but also for the foreign investors and so-called institutional investors, like these insurance companies, pension funds. They could be the owners of the shares of our funds in Russia, art funds in Russia. We are also planning to post the listing of our fund, and we are planning to sell our shares in the stock market. And we want every investor who is willing to participate in our fund opportunity. Unfortunately, Russian government has the limit. $16,000 is the minimum now to invest into the Russian closed-end fund, art fund. Did I answer your question? No?
Are you going to acquire art too, or just getting collections to work as a vehicle?
Will you buy art?
Ник, спросите по-русски.
Спросите по-русски, да. Просто у меня не очень хорошо.
Нет, ну вы будете покупать искусство?
Are you going to buy assets, art assets, or you're going just to collect? We are going to buy arts and art objects, the assets from the art industry, and we're also going to be invite investors who would bring their collections to us. And in the future, we do plan to not only collect, but also purchase and buy, to purchase and sell. And of course, this is the investment instrument so that we could provide the profit for our investors.
Thank you for this great program. I have a past as a derivatives lawyer, And so I've done a lot of work in the past with the International Swaps and Derivatives Association and preparing the documentation for various products. So I'm interested in terms of this future where there are art derivatives and a transparent market, what role you think sort of documentation plays, and whether you see an industry association of some kind forming, or what your thoughts are on, that's obviously been very instrumental, essential in the growth of credit derivatives, all these markets to have these standard contracts.
I would think that the derivatives will start as private contracts. And they can be done now, really. Come see. But, and they will ultimately become standardized contracts, just as options are standardized contracts, just as futures are standardized contracts, and just as ETFs are standardized contracts, effectively. So I think there's an evolution from a private market to a public market, which is part of what will take place in the next 10 years. Today you can buy a hedge against a portfolio, but it's a private transaction.
Okay, thank you. This question at the back, please. Yeah. Sorry.
This is a question to Valeria, and I'm going to ask in Russian. If you're going to buy art, there will be people who would like to cash out something, so you're going to be selling something. What are you going to do? You already doing something, or it's your future? In reality, the construction of our fund is created for the long-term investments. Our investors can step out in different ways. They can wait until the fund term is over, and the second, also we are going to hold meetings of the shareholders if the shareholder is going to vote against certain actions of the fund. For example, the fund would like to raise the bar of the success interest of the fund or anything else, and the shareholder can vote against that decision. And then, according to the Russian legislation, the fund has to either offer this shareholder to purchase his, to pay for his share and step out, or he can decide if he wants to continue participating in it. And as I said, we are planning to participate in the stock exchange, and also our future, our shareholder can sell their shares in the stock exchange market.
Alfonso, Global Marketing Alliance, representing the bank cards for Hugo. A question for Asher. You alluded to the joy of collecting emerging artists based on certain standards or criteria. Could you detail what some of those may be?
I think that I talked about you could invest in emerging artists. Collecting emerging artists is here and here. Investing emerging artists, I think you would want to do some research on what price area an artist or artists in general seem to be seemingly responsible in the community, number one. I think you'd want to know who their dealers were, number two. I think you'd want to know what kind of museum representation they had and who else was looking at them, number three. I think that you'd want to understand the imagery to a degree to see its repetitive form in the world from that artist and its recognition in its repetition. I think there are a series of somewhat subjective, but not completely subjective, pieces to it, especially the price ranges and so on, that could give you an edge in trying to invest in artists. You don't want to investing. Now, I'm not talking about collecting. Let's differentiate. You don't want to invest in a totally unknown artist who has never had a show and no one's really looking yet and he's struggling to get into a gallery. I like to buy them, but that isn't where you invest. You do want to invest in someone who has the backing of a responsible gallery, who's working on putting them in museums, who is doing the public relations necessary, and you want a personality in the artist that is progressive and pushing for himself or herself. You don't want someone who just says, here's my work, let it go, the world will take it. They may, but probably long after he and you are dead.
I want to add something to this. One of the American artists said, I walk into the room, how I distinguish between bad art and good art. I walk into the room, I see art, and I think, wow. Then I walk out, and I said, so what? I come to the room, I see art, and I said, so what? Then I go out, and I said, wow.
It's what you remember the next morning that's good art, but not necessarily good investment.
Good art is always good, but a good investment.
Yes, for me, yes.
A question to Asher.
I think we have to watch out for this guy. Breaks all the records.
Since artists, well, at best get 60% of what a dealer sells his piece of art for, what would you think of an investment idea of the following nature? You contract leading artists to deliver, let's say, 10 paintings over 5 years, and you pay them more than the gallerist would pay them. And with that art, you do exactly the same what the other art investment companies do. You exhibit it, you promote it, and then after a certain period, you sell it.
Aren't you really assuming the expenses of the gallery and understanding why they pay only 40 or 50% back to the artist in that case? I mean, there are some folks we know, leave the names unknown, who buy big bulk works of artists that they believe are becoming popular. And generally they buy them either at a very small dealer commission or no dealer commission. And I think that probably works if you catch the right artist at the right time. But I think if you're going to go through the exhibition and the dealers perform some services. They perform the services of exposing the artist to the world. And I think the world, the museums, et cetera. And I think if you're going to perform those functions, then you have to understand a bit why the dealers get 40 or 50%. A lot of dealers don't perform those functions too now, but that's a different horse. All right.
Again, a question to Asher. Would you give us a couple of specific examples of your recent transactions where you provided guarantees?
No, I won't, because, as I said earlier, anonymous and secret is part of the business that we offer.
That's unfortunate. Yeah. We need a bit more than Brilov collection today.
Pardon? No. You put me out of business.
But we need transparency in your future. You've talked about some quite sophisticated instruments to use against art, and we've seen what happened in the more traditional markets when the instruments got a little too sophisticated. What happens if the underlying asset, the artwork, just loses value? Are you not then, is there not a contagion around many, many more people than there would normally be now?
I would think so, but all of you who like gold so much should really understand that there's probably 1% of the gold in the world that derivatives are written against. And if any little part of that chain breaks, you're looking at a mortgage market all over again. And that will be in the art market too. There will be a chain. And the chain will consist of Mr. X who buys a put, and then Mr. Y buys a put from the next guy along the way. And somewhere down deep there's a piece of art or a collection of art or a type of art. And if the hedging doesn't take place as real hedging, as it did not in the mortgage market, and as I think you will find one day it isn't in the gold and silver markets, you risk a possible disaster as time goes forward. I've been in that business for a long time. I developed some of the early option and convertible bond trading techniques and derivatives. And I can tell you when the hedges at the investment banking and the banking level fall away, and when these folks get stupid at what they're doing and say, well, we're just going to do it because of big profit margins, we don't have to worry about hedging, it's a big risk for the marketplace, all marketplaces.
But is gold not a less intangible
No, because gold tomorrow, gold as of today, the 10-ounce bar is no longer. You can no longer deliver your derivative or your future and get a 10-ounce bar. That's already been cut off, doesn't exist. And that'll come to the 100-ounce bar as time goes on. And the government will say, now it's only dollar settlement. And then what do you have? So it's not quite so easy. And you could say, well, I have physical gold, and that's nice. Ever try to store 1,000 ounces of physical gold? It ain't easy. So it's none of these markets, none of them are as clear as they seem. Everybody will give you why his market is the best market, it can't go wrong, and so on and so forth. They can all go wrong. And this one, as it becomes a more derivatives market, can also go wrong. And it can go wrong not as a derivatives market. All markets can. I just think it's been better than most, maybe all. And we hope that'll continue.
Well, we might have time for 2 more questions, I think, before we wrap up.
Sorry.
And we have, oh no, that's, no worries. And before we get a couple of other questions here, I would like to say that we intentionally did it as dialogue rather than presentations. However, presentations for some of our speakers are available. There is a website where you can download them, including the case study on the Brylov collection securitization and some of the data which we wanted to share with you in run-up to this event today. And also we'll make sure that some recordings of this event are made available to you after this event. And
I have a question for Asher. Question and comment. I do think technology, the development of technology makes inevitable what you're saying, you know, that there's going to be an art market. The dilemma maybe is what Amelia is saying. As participants have less and less knowledge of the aesthetics and the history of what they're trading, are you really going to get, do you feel you're going to get true price discovery for the asset that's being traded?
Can you really tell me what you mean by true price?
Well, I mean, you could argue that today when someone's, let's say, bidding $25 million for a Jeff Koons, you could say, well, they probably don't really know what they're doing. But you'd like to think that whoever's buying and selling art, knows about art history and has an appreciation of what they're doing. And if you
hit home.
What? Excuse me?
You hit home. I think that most of the people buying art today at the higher levels in the auction houses don't have a clue. I think they see an Andy Warhol in the neighbor's house, and the neighbor has a big house and a Ferrari, but he also has an Andy Warhol, and they want an Andy Warhol. And then they see one in the museum, and it looks like the one that they could buy at auction, and it just gets silly. I think it's a bunch of followers, but I think that's almost always been the case.
True.
And I don't think it's going to change. It's sad for me. I happen to like Jasper Johns better than Andy Warhol just a little bit, and he sells it at 1/10 of the price today, and there aren't a lot of them out there. So what is true price?
All right, then I think we probably can conclude on that. And thank you very much for being with us today. And our speakers will be still available for some follow-up. Thank you.
Are you in New York or Long Island?